For two pianos and two cellos.
There we go. I can hear you now. I hit the magic button, and now you're working properly.
I can hear myself as well. Jan really wanted to do Schumann's Andantine Variations for two pianos and two cellos, which is a gorgeous piece, but quite rarely recorded. So we did that recording a couple of years ago for Sony.
Well, it's interesting. That's a great recording because he also does the Dichterliebe, I believe.
He does that with Alain Grimaud, which is also on the recording and participating in Andante.
Yeah, well, I was thinking of him because, he's doing these concerts with Bill Murray. I don't know if you've heard about it, but he's teaming up with Bill Murray. I've heard about it.
I've heard that he met Bill Murray on the plane, actually.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the story. They met on the plane.
And I wanted to ask you if you had any good plane stories to start us out.
Oh, I've got a million plane stories just to start from. For example, I once, many years ago, when sitting on the plane, and I just saw all those people with instruments, and I found that the people with the instruments on the plane were Kremerata Baltica.
Oh, yeah.
And the person sitting next to me was Alexei Igudisman, who at that time was touring Baltica and Kramer with his duo partners.
He's a musical humorist.
He's a musical humorist, and they, quite have developed their careers since then. That was years ago, but it was quite a pleasant encounter, and up to today we keep in touch. The person I last saw on the plane was Janine Janssen boarding with her violin to Japan, and I recently saw Alban Gerhardt boarding the plane with a cello on his back and his kid on his front.
Wow. So he had two children, really. One on the back and one on the front.
One on the back and one on the front. So I've seen quite a few colleagues boarding and deplaning.
Right. But they're carrying their instruments. You obviously can't carry your instrument.
I find myself very lucky this way. I don't know whether you've been following. I'm sure you have, actually, because they're parts of your job, that so many people have had troubles carrying their valuable instruments on the plane. Now, we're not going to mention names of companies, although we could. So I do consider myself lucky that it's in the same time challenging to play every time on a different instrument, to get a different Steinway every time. But it's it also leaves a spot for spontaneity. It leaves a spot of the improvisation. It leaves some space to do some work on the spot.
So
I've just met a wonderful piano technician today in Toledo, who's been so knowledgeable and so accommodating that switching instruments, he made switching instruments seem easy and nice.
So you get a little time on the piano beforehand, obviously.
I do. It depends on the hall and on the orchestra's schedule, but if I get in early enough, I'll get some downtime by myself on the piano to get to know the instrument and to get to know the hall and the way they interact with each other.
Now, you're a busy recitalist and somebody who performs often throughout the year. How many different pianos have you had to guesstimate do you think you've played on in the course of your career?
I every time play a different piano unless I return to a hall. But, for example, to Toledo, I'm returning now after 5 years. I couldn't really say that I remember the piano or that I've had memories of the Paris style as a concert hall, but I've played so many concerts and so many different pianos in the meantime.
You don't remember me either, I'm sure.
I do remember.
We did speak briefly last time you were here.
We did speak briefly with it, and I remember coming here, but everything else is quite a haze, I have to admit.
Yeah. Well, I want to play a cut from your recent album, which includes the Liszt transcription of the beautiful music of Johann Sebastian Bach. It's not often that I have, the artist here with me. Usually I have to supply the introduction, but maybe I'll let you just say a word or two about this recording before we hear it.
Well, the recording was done about 9 or 10 months ago, and it's a CD that's been published this autumn. It also has been distributed by Sony Music in Europe and by Naxos in the US. The particular recording is a recording of Liszt's transcription of the gorgeous Prelude and Fugue in A minor for organ by Johann Sebastian Bach. What really drew me to that is discovering Liszt as a more multifaceted artist than just a virtuoso and a party boy that we know him for. He really has had different phases in his life. He really has a very layered personality, and I find that his Bach transcriptions have been, because we often see Liszt as this virtuoso and this really ego-driven, narcissistic, humongous talent. But the way he transcribed Bach is something that he has done with ultimate and humbling admiration and care for the composer. The second thing that made me very, or let's say even more appreciative of Liszt, is the fact that Bach was a relatively unknown composer until Mendelssohn sort of rediscovered him, and he dedicated really a lot of his personal time and space in order to bring Bach back to the audiences. So the fact that Liszt, of all people, Liszt, whose personal musical style is diametrically opposite to Bach's, invested his time and space to, contribute making Bach's music more reachable and more playable. That says a lot, not only about Bach, but obviously a lot about Liszt's human and musical qualities.
Great. Well, let's hear it now. This is Martina Filjak at the piano with the first of the Preludes and Fugues of J.S. Bach as transcribed by Franz Liszt here on FM 91. The Prelude and Fugue number 1 in A minor from the collection of 6 Preludes and Fugues of Johann Sebastian Bach, as transcribed by Franz Liszt and as performed by the pianist Martina Filjak. Martina is performing this weekend at the Toledo Museum of Art Peristyle. It is the final 2 concerts under the baton of Stefan Sanderling. Martina is joining the Toledo Symphony for one of the piano concertos of Mozart. You can find more information at toledosymphony.com. Or call them up, 419-246-8000. And also Martina is here in the studio with me. We had a nice little conversation listening to your recording of Liszt, talking about how Liszt has a sort of a dichotomy of being. He's hot and cold, he's complicated, he's simple in some respects. But your performance of that Bach music really struck a tone right between the sort of accuracy of Bach and the inaccuracy of Liszt, for lack of a better word, and you kind of let the genie out of the bottle just at the very end there, the way that Liszt does in the transcription as well. You told me that this is one of your recordings that you're happiest with, right?
Yes, I find that the recording process is very often a kind of frustrating one. Because,
How so?
Well, I sincerely and deeply believe in live music. I believe in concerts. I believe that music is to be relived and recreated and refelt in a live performance. And I find personally that involves a certain amount of spontaneity. It demands a certain amount of risk-taking. It involves a couple of bold moves, which, of course, I'm not sure how much they're going to come out in a Mozart concerto, which is very structured and very pure, as we know. Yeah. But still, I believe in the spur of the moment, and that spur of the moment gets frequently lost in a recording. Yeah. Perhaps Bach's or classical music is, in that sense, easier to record because you need to keep your mind on a certain dignity of a structure. Right. And there is a certain spark that is more a spark of a plan, and it's more a spark of a reason or of the ratio than of the spur of the moment. I also just genuinely and very simply like the sound of the piano on that particular recording. I find it's not very brilliant. I find it has, a dark quality to it, which is something that I really like on a piano, on an instrument.
And it fits that music.
It fits that music. Yeah, I don't like the squeaky pianos.
Well, this particular recording that we're talking about also features music of Schumann as well as Scriabin. Interesting combination there of composers. But what my eye was drawn to immediately was this cover photo, and I'm pointing at it here on my screen. Of course, you were there, so yes. You know it. It's a very enticing photo of you standing in a full concert dress, looking over your shoulder back at whoever's looking at you. But you're holding in your hands, it looks like you cannibalized the piano. You ripped the guts out of a piano there, and you're holding the entrails in your hands.
Well, there's a cute story to that photo. First of all, we were shooting in this like derelict military object, which if you take a better look at the photo, you'll see broken glass all over the floor, and you'll see that the walls have been striped of the paint just in the right way so that they look romantic. In reality,
I thought that was an artistic choice.
Yeah,
maybe.
It's not. It's just really, really a place that's been recently torn down. Wow. And so we're sitting there, and I'm saying something like, guys, it's really just too bad that we don't have a piano, but it would have been really impossible to place any kind of a concert grand in a place that was that torn down, and we were planning to do another shoot with a piano anyway. This was just like a one-time thing. And then somebody it was a huge object, and somebody went to a room on the side, and there was this empty piano from the beginning of the 1900s, and next to it was this cardboard box full of piano hammers. So like somebody tore it apart and has placed the lira wasn't there anymore, the strings weren't there, just the torn out piano hammers were all together in that one box.
Maybe you
and the piano was separate. So somebody just brought a few hammers and it's like, yeah, but look what we've got. The hammers. So that's how that photo happened.
That's amazing. None of it was planned.
None of it. Well, the best things happen without them being planned.
Yeah, that's great. Martina Filjak, let's talk a little bit about you and your history. For folks who don't know, you are from Croatia, right?
Right.
You grew up in the 80s and the 90s. I've heard you talk about it in other interviews that that was a turbulent time with civil war going on. How did you become interested in the piano? What was your pathway to becoming this concert pianist? I mean, did you start young?
My path is at first seemingly very stereotypical. So when I say that, I mean both of my parents were musicians and both of my parents were pianists. And when I was a kid, everybody in the house was playing, or their students were coming over, or their silly chamber music partners were over. I mean silly because I was really very, very jealous of the attention they were getting, whereas it was supposed to be focused on me, myself, and me.
Right.
So what I did was, eventually bringing all my toys and books and blankets under the piano, and I spent years of my childhood basically camping under the piano. Wow. Where the resonance was the loudest because, all the sound is coming from down below. So I really liked that, and eventually I must have started playing at the age 2 or 3 or 4 just through playing, and for sure I wanted to do just exactly whatever my parents did, like any other kid, actually. Right. Later on, when I was 7 and 8, I think I got structured lessons at age 5. Yeah, 5 or 6, which is pretty normal. What I mean to say is that they didn't really exaggerate in that sense. I was merely copying what they were doing. Yeah. And then I think at age 7, I really, really wanted to be a hairdresser. And at age 8, I wanted to be a ballerina. At age 9, I wanted to be a veterinarian. Wow. And then my ambitions just continued to rise. And then somewhere during my teens, I decided the impossible, which is to become the concert pianist that I am nowadays.
You came back full circle.
Yes,
and decided to
I definitely did.
Come home to the piano.
Yes.
Although you're not spending much time under the piano these days.
Not anymore, unfortunately, but I should try.
Yeah. Well, you were one of the folks that sort of made your career through the competition circuit, winning some important competitions, including the one in Cleveland in 2009. I know that's been a while ago, but we had a brief conversation about, some people do well in those competitions and they flame out, whereas you are still here and your career is thriving and you're playing all over the world. And what do you think is the difference between a pianist like you and the other folks? Is it just pure chance, or is it due to something else?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we could obviously talk about different circumstances and different kinds of talent and different kinds of life paths and different kinds of personal psychology and determination.
Right.
And we can talk about this for hours and
minutes.
days and nights, and we still won't really become any smarter than we are right now.
That's
what
true.
I can say for myself is that I certainly think that I've been very, very fortunate. I've been very hardworking and also very fortunate to have had substantial success at international competitions. Winning the Cleveland Piano Competition in 2009, after winning some European competitions before that, was not only a huge step in my life, but also the very last competition I ever did, I promised myself that should I win Cleveland, I will, never do it again. Obviously, competitions are hard and they're excruciating and they eat up a lot of your nerves. And
wow.
I find that I grew as an artist and as a person, having taken the freedom to just do concerts and meet my colleagues. Again, I have to say I've been grateful and fortunate to have met, other people and amazing musicians that were both inspiring and friendly and helpful to open doors of either creativity and inspiration or doors of personal courage, but also actual success doors for me. I would never describe any of my concert seasons or any of my steps as easy. It never has been easy, and I'm, pretty sure it never will be by now. I may have thought it will be easier some 10 years ago, but I can tell you today it's not easy, and it will never get easier. Yeah. I have to say I'm grateful, and I will continue being grateful, and for the fact that right now we're in 2017, so it's actually 8 years. 8 years since I've done my last competition, and I'm looking back at a sold-out season, and I have another very, very busy season ahead of me with different orchestras in Europe, in Asia, and America. So it must mean that, first of all, hard work has been paying off, and I must have done something right.
Right, yeah. You talked about how nerve-wracking the competition circuit was. Do you get stage fright nowadays at all, or do you get nervous?
No, I do not. I do not. I tell my friends I go on stage the way you go to the post office.
I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, perhaps. I could go to the post office, but I couldn't play, even a Mozart concerto, let alone Scriabin
Well, you
Sonata.
see, I try to keep my ears and I try to keep my heart open, and there is a lot of responsibility in what I do, but talking about stage fright is always interesting. At the end, I'm trying to imagine what a surgeon feels like, or what a pilot feels like, or with somebody who's who has other people's lives in their hands feel like.
Right.
And if I think about those people, I realize that I have no reason to be afraid.
You're putting it in perspective.
Yeah.
I see. Well, we want to give folks a little bit of a preview of the Mozart concerto that you're going to play this weekend. I don't have a recording with you, but I did give you a list of some performers, and we came across this recording with Julius Katchen, which I guess what caught your eye, aside from his name, was also the tempo. It looks like this is one of the faster recordings of the Piano Concerto number 13. But I wanted to play the first movement of it, and you're performing it this weekend. Is this a piece that's just in your repertoire, or did you decide you wanted to do it? Did they come to you and say, would you do Mozart? Curious how it happened.
Well, Mozart is... it's underrated to call him a very special composer. I think these are, however, very special concerts that we're doing. The concerts are supposed to be the season closing concerts of the Toledo Symphony. They also, in the same time, are Stefan Sanderling's last subscription concerts after a nearly what I think is a 12 or 15 year tenure with the symphony, or 12-year tenure and 15 years collaboration. Yeah. Stefan Sanderling and I have been working together on quite a few occasions. So, of course, it's also very honoring and very humbling for me that he wanted to engage me for his very last seasons, for his very last concerts with the orchestra. What's special about Mozart concertos is that among, I believe, 28 concertos that he wrote, only 3 of them are in minor key. We're playing the 13th concerto, which is in C major, but it has several minor episodes, which are very, very unusual, and they have a very particular melancholy streak, some very operatic moments that are not necessarily typical for Mozart piano concerto. So it's a little bit out of the ordinary. The concerto is also very special because it features piano on numerous occasions, less and chamber music relationship with the orchestra and more as a really prominent solo instrument with, long cadenzas,
right.
long improvised cadenzas, long solo moments. So it's a very particular concerto, and I look forward to performing it.
And this is one of the real Viennese concertos for Mozart that he wrote for his own concerts that he would perform at the pub.
Yes, and it's in the same time a very versatile concerto. It's one of the 4 concertos he performed that can be performed both with chamber music orchestra, so without winds, both with a bigger or larger orchestra with winds, and also as a string quartet. So those are the 4 concertos that are, I think, number 12, 13, 14, and 15. So I think it's 414, 449, K415, and K413. Yeah.
You know a lot more than I do about those particular concertos. Let's listen to the first movement of that piano concerto number 13. This is K415.
Yes.
These numbers get a little confusing sometimes. Pianist Julius Katchen here on FM 91.
Thank you.
That is the first movement of the Piano Concerto number 13 by Wolfgang Mozart, Kerschel 415. A recording made in 1955 with the pianist Julius Katchen, the New Symphony Orchestra of London, directed by Peter Maag. Now, if you want to hear the other 2 movements of that concerto, well, you're just going to have to make your way to the Peristyle this weekend. That's Friday and Saturday evening at 8 o'clock p.m. The Toledo Symphony is presenting a program that includes that piano concerto performed by pianist Martina Filjak, who's been here with me in the studio for the past hour. It is the final performance of Stefan Sanderling as the principal conductor of the Toledo Symphony, stepping down after 15 years with the symphony, so it is a special occasion this weekend. And Martina, as she said, is quite pleased to be back here in Toledo, and especially to be here for this concert and these concerts. What did you think of that recording, dare I ask?
Well, actually, I'm really happy we heard it. Julius Katchen is one of my favorite American pianists. I think he is very, very underrated. I liked him a lot listening to his performance of Brahms' first piano concerto. I told you just a while ago, I thought it was one of the best things that I've ever heard. I found this particular performance a bit rushed, as I just told you. It certainly had a spark, but it could be, a little bit too fast and doesn't really allow music to breathe. And we were wondering about the technical side of it.
Yeah, in the 50s, I mean, maybe they were speeding it up so they could fit it on that LP, on the long playing
That's
record.
possible, so that the entire concerto could be on one side of the LP.
Well, you imagine at the very end, he was rushing to get in under the the limitations of the technology at the time.
Who knows? Who knows? I certainly like. I don't think Mozart has to ever be very fast. I do think this particular music has always something to do with the human voice. I think it has a lot of connection with the opera. I think it needs to be structured, but the music also needs to breathe. And that particular concerto has, as I told you before, so many cadenzas and so many different little cadenzas in between things that certainly allow the music to take some space if the piano and if the acoustics allow.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about the cadenzas for the piano proper. I mean, what cadenzas are you using for this
I'm
concerto?
using the original Mozart cadenzas.
Yeah?
I've been thinking about it, but at the end I'm doing good old Wolfgang.
Yeah. Not gonna venture out to write your own. Maybe someday.
Actually, there is one or two places in the concerto where there is a small like a bridge of its own, and there I am improvising my own, but the real core of the cadenzas I'm using the original ones.
Yeah,
I might still get there, who knows.
Well, maybe, when you do the coronation concerto, you can do anything you want with the left hand.
I know.
Unless the Mozart police come running after you, and you watch out for that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I do believe in certain style. I think there are people who, play Mozart so regularly and so frequently that they just become so very familiar with the language of the composer.
They have the language in their ear. Well, Martina Filjak, the pianist, is performing again, as I mentioned, at the Toledo Museum of Art Peristyle with the Toledo Symphony Orchestra under Stefan Sanderling. It is his farewell to the TSO and to Toledo after 15 years. In addition to that Mozart Piano Concerto number 13, they also have music of Beethoven and Brahms, the Coriolan Overture, and the Symphony number 3 of Brahms on that program. You can find out more at toledosymphony.com, or you can call them up, the box office number, 419-246-8000. Martina, thank you for joining us here on FM 91. Folks can learn more about you at your website, right?
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Yes, definitely. My website is always there for more details, as is my official Facebook page and my Twitter and whatever.
How do we find those? We can just Google you, yeah?
Just Google me and you'll get there.
Martina's pretty easy. Filjak spelled Filjak.
Right.
For folks who want to know. Well, that wraps up Afternoon Classics. All Things Considered is on the way here on FM 91. I'm Brad Cresswell. Thanks for joining me today here on your public radio station, FM 91, WGTE FM Toledo, WGLE Lima, WGDE Defiance, WGBE Bryan. You can always find us online, and that is at WGTE.org.